All right, John Middlekauff, former NFL scout. You know him, you love him. The podcast Three and Out, loves his golf as well. As we get ready for the Masters, that's around the corner. But we've got some NFL stuff to talk about. So we got into this discussion on the show today, and I said, obviously, when the NFL had to write almost a $1 billion check for CTE, the game got safer really fast, and you can't touch quarterbacks. You really can't go high or at the wrong angle on anybody but a running back going forward. That's why it's really makes sense to have 2 and 3 running backs in the rotation because it's the last position you can really clobber from any angle at any time. And I said, because it's become such an offensive league, there's only one way to win with exceptional offensive quarterback play. And I said, here's the thing about Shedeur Sanders. If you're Cleveland, if you draft him, he is at best the third best quarterback in that division. He'll never be as good as Burrow. He's not that kind of prospect, and he's not Lamar Jackson. If the Steelers hit on a quarterback in the next 2 years, he could be 4. He's not an exceptional athlete, not an exceptional arm. And if, for instance, the Giants wanted him, he's not going to be Jaden Daniels, and he's not special athletically like Jalen Hurts. He may be better than Dak, but again, he would be third best quarterback in a division. And so my takeaway on Shedeur Sanders is, do teams think like that? Like it only takes one coach to love Bo Nix, right? Like Sean Payton loved him because there's a little bit of a doppelganger with Drew Brees. But when I look at Shedeur and I like him, I can't argue that Burrow Lamar, Shedeur is 3. I can't argue that Jalen and Jaden Daniels, Shedeur is 3. And those kind of quarterbacks are infrequent playoff quarterbacks. Do scouts think like that?
Yeah, I mean, these conversations definitely come up not only right now, but throughout the fall when your scouts are going in. The problem with that mindset, you would never draft a quarterback because who the hell is ever going to be better than Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow, right? Or, you're never going to, how are you ever going to find like a 23-year-old Matt Stafford? Like, more than likely, you're not going to draft this high again. And two names that I hear come up a lot, or definitely
Who?
one, and I'll use another name, is Andy Dalton, and I would throw Derek Carr in there as well. I think people that say, that type of skill set. Historically, Shedeur Sanders, those guys went pick 35 and pick 36. I think 10 years ago, he's going in the second round, and people are very excited about him. Jimmy Garoppolo as well at the end of the second round. Andy Dalton has made 168 starts in the NFL. And he was in a division with a fantastic Ravens defense and Roethlisberger in his prime. And they were going to the playoffs all the time. Carr took a dysfunctional Raider team twice to the playoffs. So if Shedeur's in that mold, it's really on the organization. And if you're the Browns, Andrew Berry's pretty good GM. Stefanski's pretty good coach. They got a lot of talent on the team. So if he can just become that Andy Dalton, Jimmy Garoppolo, Derek Carr, yeah, you're not going to beat, if Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow are on, they're going to beat you. But you still have a lot of other games throughout the season. So it's if you can build the team well enough, can't you compete to make the playoffs? I mean, they're drafting 2 overall right now, right?
Right.
And granted, that's because, I mean, Deshaun became one of the worst quarterbacks we've ever seen. Their team just fell apart this year. But more than likely, they're not going to draft this high again. Now, is it a quote-unquote overdraft? Yeah. But the reason Mac Jones and Daniel Jones and those type guys became disastrous, you couldn't even function with them as your starting quarterback, right? Andy Dalton for 7 straight years with the
Right.
Bengals, they did a good job. You could just every year you went in like we're going to win 10 plus games. The Browns would die to do that. Their owner, who can be a little off the wall sometimes, I give him credit for making the comment the other day. You never hear
Yeah.
that, admitting we still owe the guy $90 million. It's a disaster. It's like, well, yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, they never say that. He is spending a lot of cash. The salary cap's different than cash being spent. Jeffrey Lurie talked about that. I saw today. They are spending, I think they've spent more money over the last 4 years in cash than any other team in the league. It's like well over $1 billion. So he is not in this to lose, but the betting markets have Abdul Carter as the heavy favorite to be the number 2 overall pick. So maybe they're thinking Shedeur Sanders. What the hell's the difference of Shedeur Sanders? I know you like Riley Leonard's of the world and those type
Yeah.
guys. We can get a guy like that in the second or third round, and maybe he can be like our Cousins or Dak. They also talk and think like that. So maybe they go, I'd rather have Riley Leonard or Kyle McCord and Abdul Carter than Shedeur Sanders and whoever else we would get in the second round. So I think you're doing a lot of those conversations.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of people saying that Jackson Dart has a better arm than Shedeur Sanders. So you might as well just wait and draft Jackson Dart, although I would say he's not nearly as accurate as Shedeur Sanders, and accuracy to me is like a real thing,
Yeah, it kind of
maybe
matters.
the most important thing. Jalen Milroe's mechanical. I think he has to fall to the right hands, or he could just be Anthony Richardson 2.0. Yeah, I've said Kyle McCord at Syracuse. I take him in the second round and feel pretty good. I will say this though, that people say it's not a very good draft, and I'll tell you, I look at certain teams that need skill players, like the New York Giants. If they got Travis Hunter with their first pick, and in their second pick is it Trayvon Henderson from Ohio State
Yeah.
with Malik Neighbors, I look at that and I think to myself, oh, that's a great draft for the New York Giants because I like their head coach as an offensive coach. And I think Russell will actually be a better version of the Pittsburgh Russell because I think Mike Tomlin's culture is years behind Brian Daboll offensively. Is there a team in this draft that you look at and think, it's not a great draft, but what they need, running back, tight end, defensive tackle, there's a surplus of in this draft? As I've told you, Fubo is my favorite way to watch live sports. Flying from Chicago to LA this past week, I'm all over Fubo. NFL, NBA, baseball, college sports, tournament. Baseball's here. Masters next week. And, sometimes you're at one of your kids' games. You're at a family function. You want that phone and you want Fubo next to you. Just go to FuboTV.com/Colin. FUBO. FuboTV.com/Colin. Get $50 off 2 months of Fubo. I have been using it for years. I'm addicted to it. It is the first place I check when I'm out, but want to keep attached and informed on sports. And they've got more than sports, but check it out. FuboTV.com/Colin. $50 off. 2 months. Fubo TV.
Well, I think if you look at the Giants, if you're Brian Daboll, people go, why would they sign both those two guys? Because Brian Daboll's coaching for his job. Shedeur Sanders does not help him at all in 2025. So he can take two quarterbacks, let the cream rise out of the two, and go back and forth. He would go all in on Travis Hunter. He would want players that help him win immediately. So if you tell me they get Travis Hunter and they're starting running back or starting tight end or just another more explosive player, yeah, I mean, I think the Giants are just much more feasible. You watch them at the end of the year last year when they had some injuries. It's like that. This team has a lot of parallels with the Patriots, right? Just no talent. What's going on here? But all of a sudden you get Malik Neighbors, which he has concussion issues. You get another concussion. That's a little scary, but there is no disputing his physical gifts. I mean, he's a freak. I mean, that's one you look back, and this is the hard part about the draft. There is no such thing as a high floor because any player might not work out. It doesn't matter how your floor is determined once you get in the NFL. All I heard last year was like Marvin Harrison's floor is so high. Malik could be boom or bust. And then you watch, you're like, you don't think the Arizona Cardinals regret not going Malik Neighbors over Marvin Harrison Jr.? Because they do. And the Giants benefited from them making that choice. And I think we use that term a lot. Ceilings are real. Like certain guys have higher ceilings. Cam Ward's ceiling is obviously higher than Shedeur Sanders. But a floor, like we've seen all sorts of players not work out in the end. You never know. And we always play this game a couple years later. Should have taken him. Should have taken him. No one knew that information as we sit here a month away from the draft. If we would have known Richard Sherman and George Kittle and these guys existed the fifth round, they would have been top 20 picks. So it is a little bit of a crapshoot, and I think it gets more difficult in a class like this, which obviously there are going to be a lot of really good players that come out of this draft, but no one feels that confident on a lot of these guys. It's like, well, how high is Mason Graham's ceiling? Or it's like, what's his name? The LSU tackle. It's like, well, yeah, arm length kind of matters at left tackle, but what if in 5 years he just becomes an all-pro guard? But you don't take an all-pro guard probably at 5 overall, right? You'd rather have a tackle. So there's just a lot of unknown, which I think a lot of the scouting community is just, there's like, yeah, it's just kind of coin flip year.
Yeah, I mean, in your years of being a scout, I mean, you have your top 150 players, like, and you also have the red players that you won't draft, either personality problems, character issues, or injuries. Are there any dramatic moves with 2 to 3 weeks to go in the draft process when, in your experience?
Yeah, I would say, the information most of these teams, with the owners meeting, so all the GMs and coaches are flying home, if not last night, today. And by either the end of the week or first thing next week, all your scouts come in. And the scouts and your personnel people, some of your other executives have been on campuses over the last month, right? Meeting with coaches, other personnel at those schools. Certain guys you don't have to worry about anything off the field. Like it's just perfect. Andrew Luck's but there are a ton of those guys in the draft where it's like you don't even, but there are some guys, maybe not legal, like they've been arrested or, crazy bad things, but they're just like, how much does he really like football? Which might be a non-negotiable in the organization. Like the Ravens don't draft many people that aren't addicted to football. Watch them play over the last 20 years. So you're just like, maybe you've heard some stuff and you bring that information back to your GM, to your head coach, and that can sway stuff. So it's not like a dramatic, unless someone gets in trouble and that becomes public knowledge, but it's basic things like, yeah, I've heard some things that this guy might not be quite what we thought as a person. Because I think when you know a lot of these people, when you talk to coaches and executives, most people fail, especially draft in the first couple rounds. Like they're meeting a lot of the requirements of height, weight, speed, played at sweet schools. It's usually the person that fails. Focus, screw around, not
Yeah.
dialed in, doesn't really like football. Football's not like baseball where you just get to play every day, or basketball where you play 3 times a week. You practice basically 5 days a week and you play once, and you only hit 17 of those games. For the majority of the league, you don't go to the playoffs, and then you get OTAs, you get training camp. It's a lot of sitting in a room watching tape, getting yelled at, getting up early, going to bed sore. It's not, Ray Lewis. You pay me Monday through Saturday. Sundays are for free. There's a lot to that. It's why the best players typically are football addicts at all the positions, right? The J.J. Watts, the Trent Williams, that you just go around, George Kittle, at every Travis Kelsey forever, all the Patriot type guys, the human being. But you got to be careful with overvaluing that because you do need to be able to play, and that's I think Belichick got in trouble at the end of his career. So it's hard. I mean, you run a company hiring people. You've had a lot of people on your show for years before even the volume. You're dealing with human beings with a lot of pressure, with a very public job. We all shit on it when guys miss, and it's fair sometimes, but it's also like this is really, really difficult to, pick a guy. I hear this a lot. Why can't the Chiefs find a tackle? Well, it's like, guys, they draft 31 or 32nd every single year. They don't have that much cap space. And I don't know if you've checked free agency. Usually, Hall of Fame tackles don't hit free agency. It's like, what do you want them to do? Like, Lane Johnson isn't usually sitting there at pick 32. And when you're drafting at pick 32, you're also drafting at the end of the second round and the third round. It's much easier to draft when you're the Titans and you dictate every round than it is when you're the Bills or the Ravens or the Chiefs.
The finals are here, and the only thing for certain, it's the last time to bet on college basketball this season. We've got amazing games. Duke and Houston, wow. Auburn, Florida, double wow. Been an amazing ride to get here. Unexpected happenings. Get in on the action. DraftKings Sportsbook, download it. Takes 90 seconds. Live betting, promos, exclusive content, parlays. DraftKings, the ultimate college basketball destination for March. If you want to make your first bet, make it simple. Check out the matchups. Pick a team to win. First time, here's something special. New DraftKings customers bet $5. That's it. Get 150 in bonus bets instantly. Bet the unexpected with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings app. Use it. The code is Colin, Colin. That'll get you new customers 150 in bonus bets, betting just 5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. How do you think the entire league except San Francisco missed on Brock Purdy? I mean, listen, I understand that he's not big, strong, but when he left Iowa State, that with a good coach, Matt Campbell, that program was a mess the next year. Like they were a mess. Do Did they overthink the room? I mean, again, I understand it in Brady's generation. Dude, all of his games are on TV. They're on some network somewhere. There are bigger scouting departments than ever. Why do you think people missed on Brock Purdy, who this week Jed York said, yeah, we're going to sign him to, he's a top 10 quarterback in the league?
Well, I think we naturally discriminate against shorter quarterbacks. I mean, you got to be pretty special to be a short quarterback like Kyler Murray. Baker Mayfield's winning the Heisman. He's at a smaller, non-traditional power. I heard Daniel Jeremiah say something a couple days ago to our buddy Yogi Roth, and I guess he did a photo shoot with Brock or did something through Toyota and spent some time with him. And DJ asked Purdy, like, what do you think we miss people that evaluate on your position that you never hear anyone talk about? And Brock responded, he's like, I don't ever hear anyone say, like, does this guy inspire his teammates? And DJ was like, I've never heard anyone talk like that. And then he started thinking the best quarterbacks, Brady, Breeze, Favre, Manning. It's like, they kind of were just like Mel Gibson leading the troops here.
Right.
And I'll never forget when Jimmy Garoppolo broke his foot, and remember the Niners were rolling with him. And it was like, they're screwed, the seventh rounder. And I'll never forget that next week leading into the game, guys like Fred Warner and people on defense and Nick Bosa saying, because they had been practicing against him because he was the scout team quarterback.
Yeah.
Talk about him like he had been like a 5-year NFL pro. And it's like, I don't think Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, I've watched these guys' careers. They don't just throw around this.
Right.
He is really good in the locker room with his guys. And that goes from Trent Williams to, I was on a plane flight going to the Super Bowl with Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
Who at the time's asking for a trade. And the way he spoke, like, he loves Brock. And obviously Brock is an accurate player. He's smart. He can process stuff. He's good in Kyle's scheme. He's an underrated athlete. But like, Brady's the greatest teammate of all time, right? Peyton Manning clearly just resonates with the guys. It's kind of been a knock on Rodgers. But you look at Mahomes, team loves him. Josh Allen, loved. Lamar, loved. Burrow, these guys love Burrow. That kind of matters. And I think Purdy just, there's something about him that he just gets guys. Because at the end of the day, from a player standpoint, he's kind of as the quarterback, you're the CEO of the team. And he's kind of good at that. I remember hearing that in Philly. Remember when Jalen technically wasn't a Wally Pipp because Carson wasn't injured. He just got benched. It's like, yeah, the guys just like Jalen more. They just don't really get Carson. They just like Jalen. And it's like, we don't really discuss that. And sometimes you see it. It's like, yeah, I don't think the team really likes this quarterback.
Well,
it's kind of been a thing with Russell over the years.
Yes. I mean, Russell, the minute he got out of his athletic prime, he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it on motivation and inspiration. He did it on elusiveness. And the minute that was gone, he aged very, very quickly. And I think there's something to that. I think Cam Newton had a little bit of that, where Cam was sort of about Cam, and once he was out of his prime, wow, he aged very, very quickly. I wanted to, so the overs and unders are coming out. So I want us to give the audience, have some fun here. 2 overs and 2 unders, and I'll start this. All the odds are provided by DraftKings Sportsbook. So I'm going to give you an under, then you give me an under, and then I'll give you another under, and then we'll do 2 overs. Okay. So my first under is the Chiefs at 11.5. Okay, Joe Tooney was by far and away had the most dexterity of any of their offensive linemen. He's gone. They are now crossing their fingers on a backup left tackle from San Francisco. They were 11-0 in one possession games, right? And now the division is much better. The coaching and the quarterback play, Bo Nix in year 2. Geno Smith, if they get a running back in the first round, Geno Smith has a 106 passer rating in Seattle on play action passing. Like, if you give him a run game, Geno's very good on 3rd and 2, right? He's very good with play action passing, 2nd and 5, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. So I don't think I would take the under. Now, maybe they just go 11-6, but I think the division is going to be improved. The quarterback play between Geno, second year Bo, Again, I thought last year there were offensive line injuries with the Chargers. My guess is they'll be healthier. Okay, what say you? Give me an under.
Did you say 10.5 on that number?
It's 11 and a half. DraftKings has the Chiefs at 11 and a half. I would bet the under.
Got you. They've won over 12 games. I think every year Mahomes has started, beside one.
Yep.
But I hear you. You can have a good year. I mean, they won a Super Bowl winning 11. I would say an an under. I like. I do think the 49ers, who are the Rams, won that division and were really good. And honestly, I mean, a couple plays away from potentially beating the Eagles. And who knows? They might end up in the Super Bowl and win it. They won it at 10-7, right? So, and they're a team going through a lot of transition. So the 49ers won 6 games, though they were in a lot of them. They kind of
Yes.
melted at the end in a lot of them. So I actually think a lot of people are going to think they're going to win like 6 or 7 games. I think they're going to be better than people think. But once you start getting over 10, like 10.5, you could win 9 or 10 games, be that 7 seed, hell, compete to win the division and have a good season. So I think the days, definitely this season, that's going to be very dependent on young rookie players.
Yeah, they have 12 draft picks.
Yeah, I mean we've seen the Rams the last couple of years. I don't know exactly, and they've been a fantastic team at the end of the year. They're not winning 12 games, so I think the Niners probably more likely to win 9 or 10 games. I also think that division is just going to be, the Cardinals are just a tough game every time you play them.
Yep.
Obviously, the Rams are good, and Seattle going through a little bit of a transitional period, but their head coach, I think they're a pretty well run operation.
NCAA tournament is officially here. Baseball's around the corner. No better place to get tickets to the games than Game Time. It has a new feature called Game Time Picks. I love this. It makes getting tickets for events way easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats. That's it. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find the best value. Game Time lets you preview the seats before you even purchase them. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Takes a minute. Create an account. Use the code Colin, that's me, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. The redeem code is Colin, Colin, $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Yeah, listen, they're one of my unders too at 10.5.
Seattle.
Yeah, they tried to get Greenlaw back from Denver. They did not want to lose Hufanga. Okay, those were 2 big defensive losses. And let's be honest, John, the Bosas get hurt. When Bosa was off the field last year, they were not a very good defense. They were really inconsistent. So now Hufanga's gone, Greenlaw's gone, Bosa will miss a stretch, and it's not a great draft. So I don't think there's an impact player defensively. Maybe if they got like Will Johnson at corner from Michigan, I think that would be a really, really, you'd have to be happy with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I have San Francisco as a under. So I have Kansas City, you have San Francisco. I have San Francisco. Give me another under.
I would say I think there's a chance Miami is like one of the worst teams in the NFL. Like it would not shock me if you tell me, as you and I are sitting here doing a pre-draft a couple weeks, Miami's in the mix. Maybe they don't have the number 1 overall pick, but I could see them being like the Giants or the Patriots, drafting 3 or 4. It would not shock me to see them struggle to win 4 or 5 games. I think they're going to be terrible. I thought that last year, and they just obviously when Tua's on the field, they're more functional. It would not surprise me at all if this Tyreek situation doesn't go away and he ends up playing for another team this year. I don't know if that trade would happen during the draft. I know they've pushed back against that, maybe at the end of training camp, but I just expect Miami to implode. I really do. I mean, I don't really like the Jets that much either, but like even last year, the Jets do have a lot of good players.
Oh, absolutely.
I just don't think Miami has that many good players, and they are one concussion away from all of a sudden Zach Wilson's their starting quarterback.
Yes. Okay, I'll give you an over. I think Brian Callahan's a good coach. I think Will Levis is a really, really bad NFL quarterback. I don't think he was a great college quarterback. And so I look at the over under on Tennessee, and it's 5.5. Some have had it at 6.5. I think they clear that bar easily. First of all, Cam Ward's a playmaker, and nobody's got real film on him. He didn't do a lot of straight pocket stuff in college. It was a lot of backyard stuff. And I think the league will take a while. And they did this with Jaden Daniels. It took a while to decode him. People were, Bo Nix, you're not quite sure what he is. It's a weak division. The Jags could be bad. The Colts would be bad. Houston should be pretty good, but not great. I think I'm going to take the Titans over. I think it's a pretty weak schedule. I think Cam Ward is one of the only players in the draft that can equal wins. I think people think Callahan's a pretty good coach. And Callahan didn't just lack trust in Will Levis. If you listened to his post-game comments after losses, he lost them 3 games straight out, and you watched his body language, he almost resented that Will Levis was getting in the way of wins. And so Titans to me are an over.
Yeah, I don't think people, we talk a lot about the Browns because of because Deshaun Watson's quarterback play. By a month in, no one was watching the Titans. Their quarterback play was like historically poor. I mean, the turnovers, the sacks he was taking, it was, their defense was actually pretty good.
Yes.
And like any team with a pretty good defense, when your offense is that crappy, by the time you get to like mid-November, they can't maintain that level of play because they're on the field so much. So if their offense is just solid, I'm with you. I mean, he's got his dad there coaching offensive line. Massive upgrade just based on talent alone. I would say this. If you look at Vrabel, like the linebacker version of Harbaugh, wants to play defense, wants to run the ball, former players, just guys that just win. I think the Patriots were right up there with the Bears as one of the worst coached teams you will ever see last season. Why couldn't they go 9-8 this year? If you go, the Jets are going to be awful. I think the Dolphins are going to be worse.
Yep.
Listen, the Bills, who cares? Even if they sweep you, I could see the Patriots winning 8 or 9 games.
Listen, they were 7.5 DraftKings. They are now up to 8.5. So the sharps, it looks like we're all over the Patriots. So New England was one of my overs. And I said the other day on the air, I said, I think Vrabel from Gerard Mayo is worth 3 points. I think Drake May is worth another point based on sophomore season.
Yeah.
And I think it's reasonable to assume $190 million in free agency and 8 to 9 draft picks is worth 1.5 to 2 points. So if they're just 5.5 points to 6 points better, and again, you're talking about between the draft and free agency, like 8 to 9 new starters.
For sure.
And a couple of high-end starters. You're talking about Drake May, potentially with a Travis Hunter. You're talking about the worst coach team to probably one of the 7 to 8 to 9 best coach teams. That's 5.5 to 6 points. They were 3-6 in one possession games with a rookie quarterback. If that's just 6-3, you don't have to go 9-0. This is an 8 to 9 win team. And again, the Jets are a bit lost. I agree with you. Miami's a mess. So I think New England's in play.
I would say the other team would be, speaking of Harbaugh, the Chargers. Last year, I just didn't pull the trigger, and he did exactly what he, of course, did. They were the 5 seed. Well, this year it's 9.5, and everyone always gets off the scent with them during like free agency. Jim is not going to trade for DK Metcalf and give him $150 million.
Nope.
He didn't do it last year. He's not going to do it this year. He won't do it next year. You know what he will do, though? In like the second round, all of a sudden, he will draft his starting tight end for the next 7 years. And in the third round, find a defensive tackle that everyone's going to be like, this guy's not that sexy, who will just be a starter for him for a long time. Then you watch the season, and you just go, God, their team is just physical and good. He has a really talented quarterback. Why couldn't they win 12 games? I mean, their over-under right now is 9.5. I think they are a lock. I mean, Jim Harbaugh is now coached in the NFL 5 years and made the playoffs in 4 of them. So I don't know if they can overtake the Chiefs, but it wouldn't shock me if it gets a little closer. And don't let free agency fool you. He's never going to play and swim in that end of the pool. They are never going to do that. But, you've talked about this. Huge advantage for Jim. All these kids coming in the draft, he's recruited them all, especially the good ones. So he's going to know these guys. It's going to be a huge point of difference for him. I would expect them to have a good draft. His GM, I think, is pretty good. I mean, look at last year. It's like, how did they pass on Malik Nabers? I don't know. They just got their starting tackle for the next decade. So I think the Chargers, they fooled me is the wrong word. I just didn't have the cojones just because I was like, I don't know if their roster is quite good enough. they're not going to have great wide receivers. He typically never does, and he always wins. He won a national championship. He went to a Super Bowl. Like he's not exactly going to have Jerry Rice in his prime, and it's going to work out just fine.
Sorry to interrupt this great video, but please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you. Now back to the video. Yeah. Speaking of college football, so I mean, in the draft is obviously a convergence of pro and college football. I love this whole Andrew Luck, GM of Stanford, and like now college football has an NFL feel where teams are paying
Yeah.
players and there's a general manager. Um, I got into this a conversation the other day with somebody about the NFL draft and Deion Sanders, and Deion looks like he is all in on Colorado, and he looks like he is stepping back on helicoptering as a dad, which I understand, on his son Shedeur Sanders. Um, are you surprised that Deion Sanders appears to be all in on college football and all in the most unlikely place that Deion Sanders, a Christian man, would land, Boulder, Colorado, which is, you can smell the cannabis from Denver. It is a quirky, anti-establishment. I mean, it's Eugene, Oregon, which I love,
Yeah.
but I would have never guessed that Deion Sanders would have picked Colorado. And when he signed that extension, I thought, Jesus, he's really all in on this thing. Are you surprised?
A little. And I always give a guy a lot of credit, and I don't have Deion's financials in front of me, but I think it's safe to say he did not need to go into college football for money. Like he was already pretty well off and done pretty well financially. And one thing, once his children leave, right, to go to the NFL, he easily
Right.
could have been like, "It's been a good run. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll do it for a couple more." It feels
Yes.
like Deion Sanders more than likely is going to be coaching for years to come, and eventually, I expect him one day to be in the SEC or some big program.
Right.
John Lynch did the same thing. It's like John Lynch really going to be the GM. 9 years later, the guy's all in. He's going through like transitional periods. He's like, "Let's do it." It's like these guys love football. I mean, having been around coaches and these players that get into coaching, you got to be a football addict. And I think people underestimate, especially Deion. I'll never forget, I've told this story before. Bobby April, who was a special teams coach in Atlanta, he's like, everyone got it wrong with Deion because at the time he's in these music videos and the chains and kind of just the way he carried himself. This guy sat in the front of my meetings. No one practiced harder. And like he was just a special guy to coach. He's like, no one I would rather coach than a guy like Deion Sanders. And I think if you would ask me at 15 years old in the mid 90s, Deion would have felt like a pain in the butt, like a TO. He was the
Right.
opposite, I think, as a player. People loved coaching him. Here's the other thing he's got going on now. His buddies are with him. Warren Sapp's his defensive line coach. Marshall Faulk's his running back coach. I bet he's just pretty cool place to work. Plus, here's the thing with Colorado. They kind of needed him more than he needed them. And now
Yes.
they've paid him a lot of money. And the other thing with the transfer portal, if you're willing to cut checks, I think obviously you're going to have advantages at Texas or Ohio State, but at Colorado, the other thing, look at his conference. Why can't he compete? Oklahoma State's kind of falling apart, and T. Boone Pickens is no longer around. Why couldn't he make serious? Arizona State was just in the playoffs. Deion's got
Yes.
to be thinking, if we can recruit pretty well the next couple of years, why couldn't we win 10, 11 games and win this conference and get a bid? And he's not wrong. And then eventually, if Florida or one of those schools calls, I think he would eventually take it. But I don't think he's just leaving for a quote unquote like lateral job anymore. It would have to be a cream of the crop gig. Like they're paying him what? Basically 10, 11, 12 million dollars a year for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I've got to be upfront here. I always thought Dion was a little inauthentic. I mean, I knew he had a belief, religious conviction, but he was always a little showy for me. The Tim McCarver baseball stuff.
That's what Bobby April used to say. Don't let that fool you, because
Yeah.
at his core, he loves when they were for his first year during spring practice, they were tackling to the ground. And I went, where Dion gets mistaken by a lot of people. This guy's an 80s, 90s football guy. This guy grew up around George Seifert with those Cowboy teams. Even the Atlanta teams, when he first got there, weren't terrible. Like this guy was used to a culture in football that is not the culture now. Right? That's why when the story came out about Troy Taylor, who Andrew Luck just fired and Stanford fired, I was like, there's not enough detail. Like, is this guy just an asshole, or is he legitimately crossing the line? Because football culture is not like a pretty place. You're getting yelled at a lot of swear words.
Yeah.
It's just an edgy environment, off season and in season. And I think Deion's very comfortable in football. Certain people you're comfortable behind a mic. Deion's just comfortable around football players, running football practice. Now clearly, I was impressed. Warren Sapp, they hired him to be the
Yes.
D line coach, and by midseason, I was gambling on Colorado a lot. I was like, God, their defensive line is really improved.
Yeah, it's just there are things. I'll be honest with you. Sports right now is in an interesting place. Baseball's on fire. I mean, the
Yeah,
torpedo bats. I
it's
mean, there's
awesome.
just it's great. And I mean, women's basketball. Caitlin Clark is she's a real sensation. I mean, the Jimmy Butler move to the Warriors and Luka LeBron is absolutely infused the league. There's no question. And the college football playoff. I told J Mac and I talked about this week, and I said when I got into this business, like when football ended, you had like a month of it was dead. And I'm like, well, now football's been extended 2 weeks, and they're going to add an 18th game, and they're going to give us another bye, so that will extend it 2 more weeks. And I'm like, football now is Labor Day to March 1st. You get a week on vacation, you come back, it's free agency and the tournament. And I really like what college football is doing. I'm not a traditionalist. And I do think the NIL bringing in general managers now is necessary. I don't want Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day being capologists. Like, let's get somebody in the building that knows what the hell they're doing. But I, the only fear I have about football. This is weird, but remember a few years ago when the NFL really made a point of targeting women and moms because you were having in certain states the turnout level dropped precipitously with concussion fears. And I was thinking about this the other day, John. I don't remember a draft with less hyperbole. People are saying this is as bad a draft as we've had. Like outside of running back and maybe defensive tackle, there's just not a ton of talent. And I do wonder if this is the first draft, and now the NBA, 2 out of 3 drafts don't give us much. I mean, Cooper Flag is a domestic product this good is so rare. You can't even name the last domestic product that looked this good. Zion was fantastic, but he didn't have the dimensions and the dexterity and the overall game of Cooper Flag. He was a torque machine. He wasn't this. He wasn't close to this. His game didn't look like this. Is that in college football, I'm wondering if about every third or fourth draft this point forward, because turnout levels have dropped, because there's a fear of concussions with kids, I wonder if we're going to become the NFL. It's got a little NBA feel to it. Last year, John, you had 10 virtually unwatchable teams, double the number of teams that were non-competitive by early December. Do you think it's possible with lower turnouts and that the game will start to be a little more NBA, which there is 8 great, 8 okay, and 12 unwatchables? And now for our next segment, Whiskey Business, brought to you by Green River Whiskey, the official whiskey of the Colin Cowherd podcast. If you want to enjoy life's simple pleasures, reach for Green River Whiskey. Whether it's rye whiskey, single barrel bourbon, you're getting over a century of craftsmanship packed into every bottle. Hop on over to greenriverwhiskey.com and discover a legend in a bottle today.
I do think the NFL drafts have always been like, you have some bad drafts. They don't happen as frequently, I would say, as the NBA. But last year looks like it has a chance to be like a historically great quarterback draft, which is
Yeah.
pretty crazy. I mean, obviously they had 12 guys in the top, or 6 guys in the top 12, but 3 of them are already pretty good. I would say that one concerning part in football is, Brady's big thing. It's never been easier to play quarterback, and he's not
Right.
wrong because you don't get penalized throwing over the middle. They can't hit you. But the quarterback play can be pretty bad. I mean, I feel like guys like 15 through 32 are really hit or miss, and their
Yeah.
backups. And I think a lot of this is the training in college now with guys transferring, the training in the pros. you don't have as much. I mean, training camp, I feel, and again, the salary cap has changed things, but I remember growing up, a lot of teams went too deep with starters, right?
Yes.
Their backup was like DeBerg or whoever, and it was like that guy could be a starter somewhere else. And that really isn't the case anymore. It feels like a lot of teams, like if their starter gets hurt, they will lose every single week.
Yeah.
And so I think the importance on the quarterback is awesome when it works, when you nail it. But
Yeah.
if you miss or that guy gets injured, the fall off is precipitous and it's a problem. But I do think that if you just look over the next couple years, I think the talent in college football feels pretty high. Now the difference though is, if I was an offensive lineman and I went to Iowa or Wisconsin or just some of these schools, like I was going to get developed and more than likely I was going to get drafted if I was a good player. Even if I wasn't a first round pick, second, third, fourth round, I'd play in the NFL a long time. Well, now if I'm starting at Iowa, they're like, God, this guy's an all conference guy. Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas call you. So you start moving around in your development. Maybe you change
Yes.
schemes.
Good
And
point.
I do wonder in football,
Good point.
in the NFL, like part of the reason I saw Kyle Shanahan, he's like, God, I didn't expect our backup tackle to get $15 million a year. Well, I was texting with Andy. They love the guy because they think, the only reason he didn't start is because Hall of Fame tackle, and that guy has played before. They like what they saw, and they know he's a good guy, and they know he's been coached well. Same place, same coaching staff for 4 years. So that guy, you don't last that long, and they depend on you to basically be their swing tackle for 4 straight years if they don't think really highly of you. Now, do they overpay a little bit? We can debate that, but they know exactly who's been coaching him. In college, it's like, well, he's been two different programs and three different coordinators. It's a lot of movement now, changing stuff, which I think the front offices are still trying to get a feel for that because
Yes.
it's never quite been with quarterbacks. It's a little easier with some of these other positions. Is their development? Do they actually have room to grow in the pros? That maybe they would have been maxed out before.
Yeah, I mean, take Will Howard. I liked him at Kansas State. And then at Ohio State, did my perception change and my expectations because I didn't like him as much? Because I was like, well, they have better talent. You have to be consistently good. Kyle McCord at Ohio State, I was like ham and egger. Then I watched them at Syracuse and I'm like, shit, that's a second round pick. That guy's good. So I'm wondering if scouts are doing that. Like just Ohio State quarterbacks. I'm like, Will Howard, I wanted more. I saw him at Kansas State. I wanted more. I'm disappointed. He may not have changed at all. Kyle McCord, I'm now on a high because I think he played with far less talent and he put up huge numbers.
Well, we talked about Purdy. Purdy's a good example. After his junior year at Iowa State, when he was really good and they were competing to be like a top 15 team, you don't think teams, I mean, Oregon's done this now like 3 years in a row. They, Dylan Gabriel, Bo Nix, teams like that would have called Brock Purdy. And who knows, maybe Brock Purdy then goes to Oregon. He's playing on national television games. And if he's good, instead of going last pick in the seventh round, maybe Purdy goes in the fourth or the third round.
Yeah.
So look at these transfer quarterbacks. Besides J.J. McCarthy, last year, all transfer guys. Drake May didn't, but remember, Mac Brown came out going into his junior year, was like, he's offered $5 million. Luckily, he's loyal to us. And it was pretty clear, like the three teams offering him that much money. This year, all the quarterbacks are transfer guys. Cam Ward, this is his third school. Shedeur, Kyle McCord. It's like Cam Ward is a great example. He was going to the East-West Shrine game when he decided to commit to Miami. He probably would have gone probably third or fourth round last year. Now he's been, I mean, the Titans, from what I've heard, I was in Nashville a month ago, pretty good source. They'd been dead set on him for like a month. This guy's going the number one pick, all because he transferred. If I were these quarterbacks, it's a no-brainer if you get the opportunity to jump up to a top 20 team. And even if and it's not just Washington State. What if you're at like Minnesota or some of these programs and you can just take that next step? So that's where in the conference, the top dogs they're just feeder systems. All these programs beside the top 15, 20 programs are essentially now the Billy Bean Oakland A's. They're a minor league program that I'm eventually going to take your best players.
Yeah, the NIL, one of the things I love about sports is innovation because it makes me think. I get bored of just watching game after game after game.
Same.
Like I like trades, I like acquisitions, I love free agency, period. And the NIL, it can be tricky because there's so much mobility and movement among coaches and players. Like in the NFL, the pension is so good for a coach. I mean, Dante Scarnecchia could have bounced around and made more money. He's like, I'm going to stay here. Pension's going to be great. I'm going to make $20,000 a month pension once I leave this sport. Why bounce around? Ernie Adams, why bounce around? But in college, you don't get that pension. So coaches are just constantly hopscotching program to program to program, and it's seemingly all want to be either coordinators or head coaches. And in the NFL, I find there are some position coaches that make like between 800,000 and $1,400,000. And it's like
Pays a lot.
and the pensions. Herm Edwards told me his coaching pensions are better than his player pensions.
Yeah.
And so there's so much mobility at the college level for coaches, and now the players are moving. So the chances, I mean, Bo Nix, didn't he have like 5 coordinators?
Yeah, yeah, a lot. I actually have met a guy that through the podcast in Arizona that I play golf with. His son was a big Division I football recruit over the last couple of years. And he was one of those guys that showed up at school early, like right after the winter, when the start of technically the winter semester. Within 2 days of him enrolling early, his coach takes another job. And forever the media used to freak how unfair it is, how unfair it is. That kid immediately had the opportunity to follow his coach or to go 10 other places that had been recruiting him. His phone was blowing up. Now, he chose to stay because he said it was a lot going on for an 18-year-old. But like that opportunity that you can move when stuff like that happens, to me has like neutralized the anger. The Maryland coach, everyone's up in arms. It's like, guys, the players can all leave now too. So it's like everyone is under the same umbrella of, and the difference is if I steal a coach, typically I have to pay a buyout. The players can just leave at free will, right? It's like, I mean, who knows some of these deals that are getting done. So I'm with you. I think the NIL, which is kind of stupid. I heard Deion say this. He's like, how many, beside like Shedeur Sanders, I turn on television, I don't see anyone in commercials. It's just pay to play,
Right.
which is fine, which is eventually going to change and go to the revenue sharing, be a salary cap. And that's where, to me, the general managers, the Lombardis and the Jim Nagy's and these guys, the GM jobs in college football are paying. It's not like they're paying 100,000. Some of them are paying 7 figures. I mean, these guys are
Yes.
making, or even if you're making $750,000, $800,000, if you're at an SEC school, Google how much the homes are in those areas. You're one of the highest paid W-2 employees in the area.
Yeah, it's yeah, there's I I look at football today, and for the first time in my life, I feel that college football has been pushed and prodded, but it is starting to now look closer to the NFL. And to me, that is a great thing because I've always said there's one big problem with college football. We have a big game problem. I mean, Labor Day weekend, you get 1 or 2 big games. NFL, every 1 o'clock window. That's the boring window. The best games are Sunday night, Fox and CBS late afternoon, and Monday night. And Thursday night now, Amazon buys big games. The 1 o'clock window has at least 2 big time games every week. I mean, there's only like 14 games in the NFL a weekend. 7 to 8 feel big. College football's got 60 games and 4 feel big. And I think these super conferences are creating, I mean, you look at USC's schedule this year. There's like 5, 6 games. It's like, oh, you have to watch those. Those are really exciting games. So I like the pivot. I mean, and a lot of it's Fox and ESPN said, guys, we're getting rid of the Pac-12. We're going to make these 2 super conferences. We're going to, even this expansion to 14 games in the playoffs from 12. This is all about networks. I have no problem with it. We gave college football free license forever to do what they want. And they avoided big games, and the conferences couldn't face the same number of conference opponents. It was uneven. And finally, the network stepped in and said, all right, we're going to take charge. And I like it. Last year, there were more big games than ever before.
Totally. And I think I'm pretty confident. I don't know when this is going to happen, but it does feel inevitable, right? That all the conferences, especially if we go to like an AFC, NFC, SEC, Big Ten, where it's headed, you play the same number of conference games, 9, and then you do some sort of rotating with those extra 3. Maybe you're allowed 1 non-power 4, a Fresno State, San Diego State type, but no more UC Davis playing USC. Like those days have to end. You're not allowed to play a Division I AA team. So I still think we can make a couple more steps because I looked at because I saw Belichick had not Mark Andrews, but David Andrews, his former center, talked to the team. So I Googled their schedule. I mean, they got some games on that schedule. It's like it's not his fault. I mean, he didn't set the
Yeah.
but some of these teams still. I mean, there are weeks, Saban fought this forever. It's like no one wants to watch you play Mercer. And luckily in the NFL, even if the Eagles are playing the Titans on a given week, it could end up being a decent game. And every team has pros. Like there are such a stark difference when Texas is playing McNeese State. It's like you
Yeah.
cannot get mad at all the fraternities for not showing up to that game when it's
Right.
50-0 at halftime. So
Yeah.
I think we just keep moving forward. Especially now, you can lose games. Like there, as we expand the playoffs to go to 14 teams or whatever, there is inevitably going to be a 3-loss team getting in. I mean, there almost was this year
Ohio State was a
into the playoffs.
20-point favorite and lost at home to a bad Michigan team and won the Natty. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think, I think again, I never liked college football. It really mattered when you lost. And I watched Kansas City win a Super Bowl 2 years ago and play poorly in December. Like, when, they always say idealism and cynicism kill progress. And there were just college football and baseball fans, too many purists and traditionalists for me. Like, let's just make it better. Let's have more big games. Let's not crush a season because you lose in October for the second time. Like, if you reel off 7 straight wins, get you in the playoff. Like, this idea of, and there's some old things I like. There are things in sports that I miss the Rose Bowl, like when it really mattered. But how many times could I watch, Washington and Iowa? Like, let's at some point, and I think what happens, John, and I've over the course of my life, I've learned this. Certain people seek comfort in tradition, totally get it, and not everybody grows at the same time. It took a lot of Americans to get comfortable with gay marriage. It took a lot of people, many still aren't comfortable with legal cannabis. And there's a lot of sports fans, like they are just kicking and screaming. Here's all I know about college football. Ohio State can lose as a 20-point favorite and still get in. It's like, of course they should get in. Of course they're one of the 12 best teams. And Ohio State's opening with Texas. Texas is opening with Ohio State. It doesn't matter who loses. Ohio State lost to Oregon. It doesn't matter. In the end, if it's a competitive game, they'll both get into the playoff.
I mean, I'm open-minded like you, but there are parts like I do think watching the NCAA tournament, it was weird seeing Oregon play Arizona and going, this is a Big Ten versus Big 12 matchup. That was a little bizarre in the Sweet 16. But like, should Washington State be in a Power Four conference? I appreciate how hard they try and everything. They should probably play Boise State, Fresno State, and San Diego State. That
Yes.
feels right. So it's
Yes.
like you could argue, you could even trim the fat with some of the teams in the Big Ten, right? So, I mean, some of these programs like,
Rutgers.
yeah, I mean, Maryland, I mean, you see that coach, he's like, I'm out for Villanova, so it's just like I think it's ultimately going to happen an AFC NFC version of college football,
Yes,
and it's
yes.
clear where it's headed. It's the SEC and the Big Ten. We know Notre Dame, well, they'll gravitate to, where Clemson and Florida State and Miami will gravitate to, and North Carolina. Maybe you take Stanford and some of the academic schools with you to the northern one, and that's what's going to happen. And then you only play each other. Because why? The other thing is now with the amount of money that's on the line, why would I pay UC Davis or Montana to come in for $1.5 million? Why wouldn't we just? The NFL would never do that. They just
Yeah.
pool their money and they keep it to spread it with their partners. That's why the SEC gets so angry. They're making so much money and they push back. We should get more people into the playoffs. And I don't even think they're necessarily wrong, but it's like, how about we all get under the same umbrella?
Yeah.
And then those teams all have the opportunity to go. But like the NFL, everyone's playing everybody. They don't like randomly. The Patriots don't get to schedule the UFL, the Birmingham Bombers, right? Right, because they got the Bills coming up next week, and that to me is the next step, which it feels closer to like 10 years away than 2 years away, but it does feel inevitable at this
Yeah.
point in time, right? With the amount of money and with how much they're going to have to pay these players, because obviously the quarterbacks make a lot of money, but you and I hear stories about how much some of these other guys are making. It's the numbers aren't going to go down; they're only going to rise.
Right.
So let's pool all of our money like the NFL or like the NBA and just keep everyone in the same pool. And it sucks, but Washington States and the Fresno States and you're kind of just shit out of luck.
Yeah. John Middlekauff, as always, buddy. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Colin.